Welcome to this meeting of the Mid Suffolk District Council Planning Committee. I'm Councillor Sarah Mansell. I will be chairing the committee this evening. May I first of all remind you of some domestic arrangements. Please ensure that microphones are turned off when not in use. Please do not interrupt other speakers or hold separate conversations whilst others are speaking. If you are attending the meeting to speak and persistently interrupt the meeting, you may be asked to leave. Please ensure your mobile phones are on silent or switched off and that your laptops are also switched to silent. I would like to remind everyone present that this meeting will be broadcast live to the internet and will be capable of repeated viewing. The whole of the meeting will be recorded except where there are confidential or exempt items. If you make a representation to the meeting, you will be deemed by the Council to have consented to being recorded. By entering this meeting as a speaker, you are also consenting to being recorded by the Council and to the possible use of those sound recordings for webcasting and/or training purposes. The Council, members of the public and the press may record, film, photograph or broadcast this meeting when the public and the press are not lawfully excluded. If you intend to do so, please could you inform the committee clerk. If you hear the fire alarm, please leave the building immediately via a fire exit and make your way to the assembly point at Ipswich Town Football Ground. Follow the signs directing you to the fire exits. Do not re-enter the building until told it is safe to do so. So first of all, we have some introductions. On my right are the members of the Planning Committee who will make the decision. On the left, my left, we have Area Planning Manager Gemma Walker. We have our Legal Advisor Ian Dupre. We have Case Officer Avril Gowdy, and I have my Governance Officers Claire Philpott, Alicia Norman, who will make sure the meeting runs smoothly. So I'll move to the agenda with item number 1, apologies for absence and substitutions.
Thank you, Chair. We have Councillor Marriott substituting for Councillor Lawrence, Councillor Overett substituting for Councillor Matheson, and Councillor Rowe substituting for Councillor Elkin. Thank you.
Thank you. Item number 2, to receive declarations of disclosable pecuniary interest and other registrable or non-registrable interests by members. Are there any interests to declare? Thank you. Item number 3, declarations of lobbying. Councillor.
I believe we were all, or many members were shown a video presentation about a month ago.
I certainly attended a presentation about Gateway 14, so I think that should probably be declared as lobbying. So, anyone, did we all attend that briefing? So, can we make it? Put your hand up if you attended that briefing, or watch the video afterwards. Thank you. If there aren't any other declarations of lobbying, I'll move to item number 4, declarations of personal site visits. Has anyone been on a site visit? Well, I did actually go to have a site visit back in March when this item first appeared on the provisional agenda, and I went to have a look around the site, cycled around the bike paths and came back again. So I think that is a site visit. Councillor Overett?
I have also wandered around the site several weeks ago now.
Thank you. Item number 5 is the MPL 2332, confirmation of the minutes of the Planning Committee meeting held on the 8th of May 2024. This was in the late papers, so hopefully you've all had time to look through that. Are there any points regarding the accuracy of the minutes? If not, then could I have a proposer? Councillor Haddingham and Councillor Warboys, you're seconding. Thank you. So the Governance Officer will now conduct the electronic vote.
Thank you, Chair. That vote is in progress. Councillor Overett.
If I wasn't there, do I abstain or? Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Marriott. And you're in favour. Thank you, Councillor Warboys. Thank you, members. Chair, that's 5 votes for and 3 abstentions. Thank
So
you.
that's
That's carried.
So the minutes of the meeting have been approved. I will sign them at the end of this meeting. Item number 6, to receive notification of petitions in accordance with the Council's petition scheme.
None received, Chair.
Thank you. Application to discuss today, DC 2302535 at Gateway 14, land between the A1120 and A14 in Stowmarket. So I will now invite the case officer, Avril Gowdy, to introduce the application to the committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. So, yeah, the application is a Reserve Matters application for appearance, landscaping, layout and scale for plot 2000 at Gateway 14. And just as a reminder that the committee presentation is merely to illustrate some of the key points of the proposal and doesn't supplant the committee report. Just to recap on the hybrid permission. So the site currently has both outline and full planning permission. So you can see there the light yellow shaded areas is the extent of the outline permission, and the blue is that was subject to the full planning application. So the strategic landscaping and the road network have full planning permission, and access was considered under the outline application. These are an aerial image of Gateway 14. Obviously, this was pre-construction of the range on plot 4000, but this one shows the range in situ taken from above Stowmarket. And in terms of the illustrative site plan, so you can see plot 2000 illustrated in red there. On the corner with the A1120 roundabout. And then in terms of the site and the constraints, so plot 2000, as I said, occupies the plot adjacent to the A1120 roundabout. And just in terms of some context, you've got the A14 to the north, you've got the A1120 to the west, you've got Tesco's, Clamp Farm Barns, Munton's to the south, Cedars Park to the northwest, and there's McDonald's and Costa on the other side of the A1120. And some other aerial views of the site. Obviously, these don't show the range on there either. In terms of the constraints map, there isn't any constraints affecting the site. You can see the brown on the western boundary on the other side of the A1120 is the built-up area boundary. And you can also note the power lines running overhead that just clip the corner of the site there. Okay, and then moving on to the first reserve matter. So in terms of layout, it's worth noting that this reserve matters application seeks flexible reserve matters. So there's 2 layouts and elevations proposed. So we've got a site layout for a wholly B8 option, which is the one shown on screen here. And then we've also got one for a mixed B2 and B8 option, which I'll show shortly. So just as how they compare, the main difference is the use of the service yard here. So you can see in the B2 option, it's predominantly to be used for car parking. So I'll just flick back just so that's clear. So you can see the larger surface yard and lorry parking there versus the larger car park. And also just to note that we're looking to impose a condition to restrict the floor space of the B2, B8 option, so that would be a 30 and 70% split as that image shows there. Just to recap on the site connectivity, so you can see the dark blue there shows the footway and cycleway connections. And just to point out, so you've got the Toucan crossing, which is in situ now, to cross from Gateway 14 towards Tesco's. Mill Lane to the northern boundary of Plot 2000 has been stopped up and is a footway pedestrian connection. And you've also got a new footpath connection to Gipping Valley Way. But these have all been secured already under the hybrid permission. In terms of parking and EV, so this is for the wholly B8 option. So you can see 114 spaces have been provided, with then the split of EV. And just to note the difference between passive EV and future EV, they are actually the same. So active would have the infrastructure in place, and both passive and future would have the ducting in place. I think they've kind of been differentiated because passive is the compliance with the parking standards, is a 20% that they have to provide, and then the future is above that provision. And then we've got the same here for the B2, B8 option. So you can see they have to provide significantly more spaces. They're providing 327 car parking spaces. And then just to compare the difference between the lorry parking, obviously you can see they anticipate that they need significantly less lorry parking on the B2, B8 option. And in terms of cycle storage, so in the top left image, you can see an area shaded in red. Obviously that, again, it varies, the provision varies depending on which option is implemented. And you can see that the cycle storage facilities are provided adjacent to the entrance to the building and adjacent to the car park. And just to note that visitor parking cycle parking is to be provided in the form of two Sheffield stands adjacent to the entrance. In terms of staff amenity area, so we've got two quite informal staff amenity spaces at the front of the building, and they include litter bins and seats for employees to use. And then just in terms of the access, because we've got 3 access points for this site, so the yellow dot just indicates how a car might enter the site. Obviously, they're not necessarily going to drive around in that way, but they could use either of those 2 entrance points along Gateway Boulevard, and then HGVs would use, hopefully if it gets going, so that they would then use Starfinder Way and enter at the northern access point. And in terms of waste strategy, so obviously this is for the B8 option, but you can see there's a waste storage compound adjacent to the building, and there would be sort of a defined in and out route using the HGV access. Moving on to scale, so we've got an existing site plan across the majority of the Gateway 14 site. You can see the change in land from the north to the south, and that falls as you head towards Muntons to the south. In terms of what was secured at hybrid stage, a lot of the parameters in terms of scale were set then as kind of worst case scenario. So for plot 2000 specifically, it was set that the maximum building height would be 64 metres above ordnance datum, and condition 11 of the outline plan and permission secures that the building on this plot could be no more than 21 metres high. And then just briefly on the cut and fill strategy, so you can see that they're cutting, so the dark blue is the cut and the orange is the fill, so that follows obviously the levels of the land currently. And in terms of levels, just to show sort of compliance with the outline, so the top table is what was secured at outline versus the table below is the reserve matters. So you can see that the indicative cut and fill platform level is lower for the reserve matters than what it was envisaged at outline. And the same with the maximum building height, that was to be 64 metres, and the building height that we've got is 59.25 metres, and then you can see a lower eaves height and a lower building height. Just in terms of the sections, so I've split these up because they're quite long, but so this is taken, hopefully you can see where that's shown on the location plan, so I've just indicated that section in green there. So that's a section through the western footway and side of the building, and then the eastern side of the building with the service yard, and then the northern part of the building with the Mill Lane footpath. You can see that the Mill Lane footpath is higher than the base of the building, and then the other end of that elevation. And then just to illustrate a section through the A1120 and the site, obviously you can see the A1120 is significantly lower, and you've got a vegetated bank that will offer screening to the views from users of the highway. And then moving on to appearance. So these are the elevations of the building. You can see that we've followed the kind of grey and blue tones that we've got on the range building. And just to note that this southeast elevation, we have two different elevations for that one, because depending on the use of the building, obviously varies the amount of dock levelers and associated HGV accesses. And then just to touch on the elevations and the materials. So we've got cladding the same as what we had on 4000, but for this building, given the location that it occupies adjacent to the A1120 and the fact that this is the gateway building, we've got a vertical plank profile cladding with projecting fins, so that will provide some modulation and a variation in colour. And just to pick up some of the key materials, so we've got vertical cladding. The clerestory is the band, the lighter band under the eaves that runs around the building. You've got metal cladding on the roof. You've got the dock levelers and steel doors there. And there. And then just in terms of the entrance detail, obviously you've got quite a lot of glazing on the entrance and some of the blue colour projecting to define that. Just in terms of the floor plans, so I've got some closer of the office, but essentially it is just one large building, and there's no difference proposed between the B2 and the B8, even with the restriction on the amount of use. That is, yeah, there's no physical alterations to the inside of the building. First floor plan and second floor plan. And then, yeah, here's the office building. You can see on the ground floor in red, you've got some lockers and showers for as part of the cycling facilities. In terms of the roof, we've got roof lights, and then running in the opposite direction, you can see the solar panels there. Within the HGV access off Starfinder Way, there's proposed to be a gatehouse. That would look something like that. In terms of colours, as I said, we're using a similar colour palette in terms of greys and blues to stick with the design theme that we've established on the Gateway 14 development. In terms of design code, there is a condition on the outline that requires them to demonstrate compliance with the design code. So there's 2 points on here which they haven't complied with, and they didn't comply with on the range building, and that is composite cladding and brickwork. And these are some CGIs to illustrate the building in context. So this is from the A1120 roundabout looking down Gateway Boulevard. You've also got one taken from Mill Lane, looking along Mill Lane, and then the footway, cycleway to the right is the one that runs along the western boundary. This is one of the front of the building with the entrance taken from Gateway Boulevard. And then the last one here is a bit more aerial, facing the service yard. And just to briefly touch on the energy and sustainability features. So the solar PV on the roof would provide a 310 kilowatt power to the building. Air source heat pumps are proposed for heating and cooling and domestic hot water services within the building. Got BREEAM Excellent, EPC rating A, rainwater harvesting for the toilets, and excellent air tightness. In terms of the external works finishes, so just an example, this is again very similar to what we've got on the range. So we've got concrete pavers and essentially a variation in colour between to define the difference between the footways and the car parking. We've got a weld mesh fence that runs along around the site. And also to note, I haven't indicated it very well, but there's on the B8 option, we've got a acoustic fence along this boundary to offer some noise screening between use of the service yard and those that may use the staff amenity area to the south. Got concrete for the service yard, a different colour concrete pavers, and then the entrance plaza would also have a different material. And then moving on to the last reserve matter, landscaping. So this is the proposed landscaping plan for the B8 option. And just to note that 21% of the plot is soft landscaping, and that's above the 20% that's required by condition. And just to note, BNG, so that it's providing 12.22% increase in habitat units and 100% increase in hedgerow units. And just to note, because we've got two sets of landscaping plans provided with the application, the only difference is obviously with the B2, B8 option and use of the service yard as additional car parking. Obviously there needs to be a route through from the southern car park through to that one. So essentially it is just the change in this small area here. And then also just as a recap, obviously we have secured strategic landscaping around this plot, and I think this image shows it quite clearly in context. So it's not clear as to what's on plot, but you've got the on plot around here, and then you've got the strategic landscaping further around, and you can see it in context with the landscaping that we've secured on the range to the south. And just a couple of LVIA views. So this is taken from Kestrel Drive to the west of the site, near the A1120 roundabout. So that's present day. And then there's a 15-year visualization there. So you can see how the site will look when all of the landscaping is matured. And then we've got the same taken from the Mill Lane bridge over the A1120, so that's present day versus 15-year visualisation. And then just moving on to some photos. So this is taken from the A1120 roundabout facing northeast. And then taken from the A1120 also facing northeast, just further away. Then you've got from Gateway Boulevard facing northeast, facing north. So this is the footway that runs to the west, that rises up here. And then this is taken from the footway cycleway facing north. So, and this here you can see the strategic landscaping in the right of the image. Also taken from the footway, but this time looking south, so you can see the range building kind of on the horizon there. Also taken from that footway looking east. Here obviously you can see the large pylon, and that crosses the corner of the site. View from the Mill Lane Bridge facing southeast, so similar to the LVIA view, just further along that bridge. And then again from the Mill Lane footway facing east, further along Mill Lane footpath facing west this time. So you can see some of the residential properties in Cedars Park, and also some of the existing commercial units on the other side of the A1120. Also from the Mill Lane footway facing south this time, and again you can see the power lines overhead. View from Starfinder Way facing south, so this is the HGV access point. And then Gosling Avenue, which is this one here, where it intersects with Starfinder Way, facing the site facing east. From the other end of Starfinder Way facing north, so again you can see the strategic landscaping running around the edge of the site. This is one of the car vehicular access points. And then the same with this is the other one. And then, yeah, our recommendation is approval of reserved matters with conditions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Are there any questions from members to the case officer? Councillor Warboys?
Yeah, thank you. If you could just clear something up, in the papers there's an option 3 mentioned as well, but that seems to be...
Yeah, sorry, I should have made that clear. So that option has fallen away now, because that was a purely B2 option, sorry. And essentially that has a very high car parking requirement in accordance with our parking standards. So that's essentially fallen away because it can't be, that amount of car parking can't be provided on site with a building of this scale. So they've decided to progress just with the 2 options.
I see. Thank you. And the other, I know there's concerns about the photovoltaic cells and the capacity of the grid locally. If you have a mixed use with more manufacturing, would that not involve more energy consumption?
So the sustainability side has been reviewed by an external consultant, and they've recommended a condition for additional low zero carbon technologies should additional space heating and cooling be installed, but that might not cover industrial processes as such. Obviously the calculations have been done based on what, you know, at the present time we don't know an occupier. So yeah, it's based off the applicant's
the applicant's
understanding
needs,
of-
I suppose.
yeah.
Yeah. But that doesn't have to be part of this planning approval, the energy requirements.
I think the applicant, I mean, obviously we've got the applicant today, so we can ask them, but I think obviously they're satisfied that it covers what, they're providing enough solar to be, cover the needs that they think that they have.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Penny, I think I saw your hand up, and there was somebody else. Was it you, Councillor Marriott? Did you put your hand up earlier? Maybe it was Councillor Hardingham then. So we'll go Councillor Penny.
Yes, thank you for the presentation. You showed the site access for both cars and HGVs. The parking allows for a considerable number of bicycles, so I presume you would also anticipate people cycling to the site. That wasn't on your site access demonstration, but in the transport plan and the original planning documents in Appendix A, there is a diagram of how cycles would be imagined to access the site. And this would be using the cycle lane that's provided for. However, as a cyclist, I have cycled through this site a number of times, and my one and only time would be using the cycle lane because it is impractical. As if you were coming from a southerly direction, you would cycle a short way, turn right for a little bit, possibly wait for traffic to cross the road, turn left for a little bit, cycle on a bit more, turn right, pause possibly for some traffic, repeat that about 8 times.
Is there a question here?
Yes, I'm asking, is this what is still imagined as the cycling site access for the site, and is it realistic? Whereas if you don't use a cycle lane, you can just cycle in a straight line on the road uninterrupted.
I think this might be one of those ones where, unfortunately, that is the case. That's what was dealt with under the outline that determined access. So we are unfortunately constrained to layout, landscaping, scale and appearance today. So there is no change compared to the outline where the access was granted.
Okay.
Can you turn your, if that's the answer, then can you turn the mic off? Councillor Hardingham. Was it you? No, I think it's you. Then it's Councillor Everett.
Thank you. Yes, I've got a question about EV charging and the PVs. I presume battery storage would be included as part of the provision of solar panels, or they wouldn't be very practical, I presume. And secondly, I don't see any provision for electric HGV charging. An electric HGV would require between 250 and 400 kilowatt charging power. And we've obviously seen at Port 1 that we're envisaging the use of electric HGVs. There are quite a lot of models on the market already. Isn't this something that ought to be included in this particular application?
So it's my understanding that there isn't any battery storage proposed. It might be, the reason why might be better suited to the applicant. And the same goes with electric HGV. I'm not aware that that forms part of this proposal. So again, the reason might be best suited to the applicant.
Councillor Everett.
Yeah, I have 2 questions, if that's okay. Have the concerns as raised by the Mid Suffolk Disability Forum been considered and resolved?
Is this regarding the triangular
I believe that one has been resolved.
Yep.
There are they expressed concerns about drop curbs being aligned to provide logical routes and crossing places. They asked if there was an anticipation of the use of a staff minibus, if there were a number of employees with mobility difficulties, and if there would be parking arrangements and access arrangements for a minibus, and whether a lift would be suitable for disabled people, if it's also used for equipment and crates. And my other question on that is, would it be a fire-resistant lift for if there was a fire and somebody was on the first floor? And another question which they didn't pose is there a wheelchair-accessible toilet envisaged? Thank you. That's the first question.
Okay. So the drop curbs, obviously that largely relates to access that's already been granted. I mean, we could go back to my photos, but each access point has a drop curb on either side. In terms of the accessibility of the minibus, obviously one of the Gateway 14 will be providing a minibus to get employees from the train station, for example. Whether that is mobility friendly, I don't know. Again, might be a question suited to the applicant. And the same with the lift inside the building. That also might be best suited to the applicant, I'm afraid.
You have a second question.
Again, if it's not the right time to ask it, then appreciate it's our own application, but should we not still be seeking independent testing of our conclusion that a smaller building would make the development unviable? Thank you.
I don't think that's been raised specifically previously as to the viability scenario. As you say, it is our application, but from our point of view, we're the local planning authority and we haven't been involved prior to determining the application. And we are looking at the application in front of us as we would expect to do for any case. So there is the time now to make a decision on is this acceptable or not. The part of that might come into weighing the benefits. If you think there are issues with the size, is that overcome by the benefits of it or not? And to what point do we weigh that into account? Obviously, we've come to a recommendation, but if there are concerns about that, then we can certainly visit that perhaps later on into the debate. Is that okay?
Thank you. Does anyone else have any questions before I ask my own? Councillor Penny.
Just a question to aid my understanding. In the recommendations, there's a list of items for reference from the original planning application. Item number 26 is the method statement for the transportation of the shepherd's needle. I do not know what the shepherd's needle is. Just to help my understanding.
I might have to rack my brain at that point. I have to admit, it's a plant or something. Councillor Hardingham has probably got more information than I do, perhaps.
I was going to say Councillor Hardingham might be able to
It'll
answer.
be a plant at risk, a threatened species.
Okay, thank you.
Well, if no one else has got any questions, oh, you have got. Sorry, Councillor Marriott.
I don't know whether anything can be done about this, but I find it quite worrying that the illustrative master plan showed 40 metres between the building and the edge of Mill Lane footpath.
Is this a question?
Well, it is a question actually. Was that the case at the outline planning? Was it shown as 10 metres rather than 40? Was one question, and the other was it seems that the report is saying that there is no need to this will be they admit it will be an overbearing and dominant sense that users may experience, but that there's no need to discuss the mitigating landscaping, and I think it would be useful to discuss it. Thank you.
I think the first one was a question. I'm not quite sure what the question in the second one was.
Yes, I think it's just worth noting that the illustrative master plan that was submitted at outline is merely illustrative. It just provides one visual solution of how the site may come forward. That's not an approved document, so obviously layout is a reserved matter, so obviously they are free to change it, which obviously they have done here. And this, yeah, I'm not sure on the second question either, I'm afraid.
Maybe that might come up in debate. Can I just ask a few questions of my own? Some of my questions are related to the B2, B8 mix. You showed us a diagram of the waste depot for the Holy B8. Is it in a different place for the B8, B2, the waste collection point or whatever it was called? And also, the acoustic fence, is that completely omitted if it's the mixed use, or is it just pushed further back? That's my question about the mixed use.
Okay, so I don't believe we've got a waste strategy plan in yet for the B2, B8 option. Obviously, it will have to be moved because the waste compound is in the bit of the service yard that would be car parking. That's likely to be something that we ask, that we need before we determine the application. And in terms of the acoustic fence, I believe it's not proposed on the B2, B8 option because it's largely to protect the amenity of the users of the amenity space, and obviously you've then got the intervening car park between the service yard and the amenity space on the B2, B8 option.
So if there is no waste collection strategy for the B2, B8 use, and we want to determine this application, we're determining it for either. So does that mean that would be a condition that it has to be agreed before they can proceed or something?
So we could either require it before we determine the application, because I think one of the conditions, or the first condition, is essentially that we list the B8 the drawings relevant to the B8 option versus the drawings relevant to the B2, B8 option. So we can secure it as part of that, or we condition its provision within a certain trigger time frame.
My other question was, on one of the slides you mentioned a list of features that were not compliant with the design code. Could you just go through those in a little bit more detail so we know where there is non-compliance of the design code, which I presume was agreed at outline stage?
Yeah, that's correct. So the two are composite cladding, and the other one is brickwork. So we're in the same position here as we were in with 4000. There's no brick on the building. I think, the materials that we've got put forward are obviously based on sort of for their operational requirement, and I guess brickwork potentially isn't necessarily that related to a commercial site. And the same with composite cladding. Obviously we've got fully metal cladding, so again doesn't necessarily fit in with the design overall.
So the design code said that all the buildings had to have some brickwork and they had to make use of composite cladding, is that right? And what we've got here is a building that doesn't have any brickwork and is all metal cladding.
So more that the design code listed materials that would be acceptable. So if they were using brick, that's the style and type they would use. They're not using brick, so they're not in breach of that. The composite cladding, I think, was slightly different, but it nonetheless is a cladding. We have approved that, as Avril mentioned, for the Ranger Gateway 14, sort of Prop 4000. So it is something we have accepted as an acceptable material. So I don't think we're saying they are in breach of the design code. There's a slightly grey area there, unfortunately, but overall, it really we're just down to that composite cladding versus metal cladding point.
Are there any further questions of the case officer? If not, then I will now invite the public speakers to address the committee. We don't have anyone from the parish council. We don't have an objector. We don't have a supporter. I think we have the agent, Tim Sturgis, who's also accompanied by some other people. I won't list them all now, but if they are answering any questions, maybe they could just introduce themselves when they answer any questions. So thank you. So you will have your 3 minutes. If you'd like to press the button on the microphone, and I'll time you with my high-tech timer.
Thank you very much. Good evening. My name is Tim Sturgis. I'm a director at Avison Young, speaking on behalf of the applicant as their planning advisor. Hybrid planning permission for Gateway 14 was granted in November 2021. This strategic employment site will create a sustainable and high-quality business and logistics park, delivering thousands of jobs. Under the hybrid permission, the access and roads were approved in detail and are complete. Framework landscaping was also approved in detail and is substantially complete. Reserve matters consent was granted last year for the range at plot 4000. This building is undergoing fit-out with operation commencing later this year. This application before you this evening will continue the momentum and facilitate the entrance of the Gateway 14 master plan. Whilst the application is speculative, a grant of planning permission will reduce delivery time and widens the pool to encourage occupiers to locate here. This is particularly important in the current economic climate in attracting new business and skills to the district for Gateway 14. We have engaged throughout with your officers and have amended the scheme in response to the feedback. The proposed scheme before you is a modern, high-quality designed industrial development which Gateway 14 Limited are proud to bring forward. The building incorporates the following to ensure this quality: profile cladding and projective fins, adding interest to the facade, introducing blue and grey cladding colours to appropriately reflect the assessment of the context, detailed landscaping providing a green setting with associated biodiversity benefits, and meeting operational requirements with internal flexibility, loading doors and yard access, ensuring that it is attractive to future occupiers in the market looking for new premises. This application fully accords with the parameters of that outline planning permission and the design code. In this context, I summarise the benefits of the scheme. The proposal will deliver between 168 and 284 jobs subject to the use, with opportunities for logistics, manufacturing and associated office jobs. This will make a positive contribution to the local economy and is a significant public benefit. An employment and skills plan is secured by condition to ensure local training and employment initiatives are realised. Sustainability is at the forefront of the proposals, as we've heard from the case officer's report tonight. The building exceeds the BREEAM Very Good requirement, being designed to BREEAM Excellent. It will be built to net zero shell and core and will achieve an APC A rating. It optimises solar panels, delivering a 43% carbon reduction on site, and the roof structure is future-proofed to enable additional panels, and ducting is incorporated to facilitate future export of energy off-site when feasible.
Are you almost at the end?
I am just concluding.
If you can do your final sentence.
Okay, thank you very much. So the sustainable transport is promoted through the installation of ECVPs, visitor cycle parking, secure shelters, showers and lockers, access and electric to biofuel shuttle bus, and secured through a travel plan for the site as a whole. Just want to thank officers for this collaborative process, and we're pleased to be able to provide support for this application, which will continue the delivery of a strategically important site in the district. We hope this is a scheme that members can support today. Thank you very much for bearing with me on that. I'm joined by the wider consultant team who can answer the questions with me.
Thank you. Are there any questions of the agent and his team? Councillor Warborn?
Yes, I think it is to do with the energy and the sort of fitting of EV cells, and it does mention battery storage warehousing, and whether we know from previous applications of range that there are problems with capacity of the grid for exporting energy, and I've looked at the report, but are you utilising the roof space and fitting enough photovoltaic cells on the roof space to enable the building, not just as warehousing, but also if it's as engineering, to be as self-sufficient as possible from the energy. You've got a lot of EV charging points for vehicles. You've got a proposed shuttle bus, which could also be an EV vehicle. There's some warehousing come forward where they're talking in terms of actually using HGVs, which require charging as well. So you're limiting the amount of photovoltaic cells you're putting on the roof. I'm just wondering whether that's a reasonable estimate, whether in fact you could put more on and make the building more self-sufficient.
Thank you. So there's quite a few questions sort of within there, so I'll try to go through, and if I don't capture them all, do remind me. I think probably the starting point is that regardless of the end use, the assessment has been taken on the buildings as they are from a shell and core. And the reason that that's been done is obviously this is a speculative development and we don't know the end user at this stage. So that 43% carbon reduction on site is achieved regardless of what the scheme is. It's fair to say that whilst there aren't any batteries proposed, the infrastructure is there for then any future tenants come on board and provide those as they see best fits their operation. And it's probably also fair to then say that the roof structure has been designed to ensure structural support for any then future PVs beyond that, subject to the intensity of the energy use that they may have. So I think in relation to the question of if there is a more energy intensive user on the site, then there is the ability and the infrastructure there so that the scheme is future-proofed for them to come in and be able to deliver that. So it's a case of being able to model what's there now, and it has been done to the fullest extent of what it can do and is far in excess of planning policy as well in what it's achieving for the purpose of this as a speculative development. You mentioned about HGVs as well. I may defer to my colleague Mark for transport on that point, if that's okay.
If you'd just like to introduce yourself just before you answer the question, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Mark Geddes. I'm a Director of Richard Jackson Consulting Engineers. We have been supporting the applicant with the project in respect of transport, drainage and all other engineering aspects. I should point out I'm not an M&E engineer at this point. HGV charging will be forward provided, so we'll place the ducts in a similar manner to the way that we are doing the passive or future EV for the car spaces. So it will be possible to, if the tenant so chooses and their operation requires, for them to have HGV charging at a later date once we know who they may be.
Thank you. Did that cover, I think that covered most of your points, thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Are there any other questions? Councillor Hardingham.
Yeah, I've got a question in relation to the cut and fill. It seems to be that the topsoil is surplus to requirements. I was just wondering if there's any handling stipulations on how topsoil is handled and stored and how it's disposed of, because it's a valuable asset and ought to be looked after. Thank you.
I guess you'd like me to deal with that one as well. Yes, there is an excess of topsoil. Obviously, we will be using what we can within the landscaping areas to retain it on site and reduce the amount that is taken off site. There are no specific requirements that I'm aware of in terms of stockpiling. I can't see that other than a very temporary stockpile before it's loaded into a vehicle, that would be any need for stockpile. We obviously have an excess over the whole site, over the whole Gateway 14 area. There's an excess of topsoil. So yes, it is a valuable asset and it will be disposed of to best commercial advantage, I suspect.
Thank you. Do you want another? Have you got another question?
I've got another question in relation to the, well, not exactly the longevity of the cladding, but if you've got fins on the cladding, I just wonder what it'll look like after 20 years. It seems to me that it may be rather prone to growing algae in the angles and the joints, and so it might not weather terribly well or age very well. Is that something that has been looked at?
That's probably me. So I'm David, I'm the architect. As with all buildings, buildings need maintenance, and any cladding system, any brickwork, whatever, will still need maintenance. So there's always a risk of algae growing. I don't think that's any more so with the fins than with any other cladding system that we might have used there. A lot of the fins are on the southern facing orientation, so again I think that mitigates growth of algae etc. on there. There's a risk, but it's down to maintenance.
Any further questions? Councillor Warboys, you've got another question.
Thank you. I've got one more, quite different. There's some very precise ratios of warehouse into office space, warehouse into general industrial to office space. And all of these are sort of subject to different planning restrictions. What would happen if a future occupier of the space wanted more office space and less warehousing, or more in manufacturing space and less warehousing? Would that require another application, or is that flexibility built into this application?
So the way in which this application is obviously structured is to try and provide as much flexibility to the market as possible without going to all eventualities. I think the indication of the office space is typically as an ancillary office space in terms of supporting the wider function of whether it is a manufacturing or logistics operation. So I think that would be a question where if said future operator required slightly less, slightly more, we would be coming back to have a discussion with the local planning authority about the extent to which that is controlled, and that would be feasible to be dealt with by way of amendment. If it was something that was substantially different, then of course there is the ability to again come back and resubmit a further reserve matters application, obviously on this plot, if it wasn't intended for what the market requires. I mean, I think we are capturing much of what that is, and then of course it would be an application that would come before this committee, and the committee would have the ability to consider that application accordingly.
Lovely. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any more questions? Can I just ask a question about the economic benefits of the build? I think you said that there would be between 168 and 200 and something jobs, depending on whatever the building was used for. And I just wondered how significant a difference would there be in that number? I mean, that's quite a wide range anyway. That's almost, 25% different from the top to the bottom anyway. What the difference would be if the building was made slightly smaller, just because it looks like a big building on a small plot. Have you taken that into consideration? And if you'd reduced the size of the building ever so slightly, how much effect would that have on the number of jobs created?
So I suppose firstly it's worth explaining how the jobs are captured and detailed within this application on the basis that it is a speculative application. So the starting point, as with what would be any sort of standard industry practice here, is to refer to the HCA density matrix, which effectively provides a jobs per floor space ratio, which I'm sure you probably are familiar with, having dealt with applications that have come before you. The question, I suppose, of if there were a slight reduction, the question is to the degree of what reduction. Obviously, that would then have a knock-on implication in terms of what that figure would be for each use. I think the key thing here, though, probably for the committee to consider is that the scheme is designed in order to capture what is, I suppose, a critical mass for the market. And so arguably, if you continue to shrink this plot, then it becomes far less attractive and possibly not. When we talk about viable, there's a viability consideration in terms of the development cost itself, but actually whether you're going to end up here with an occupier. And obviously the intention of this application is very much to continue what's been achieved so far to date, which is securing that occupier for plot 4000, and then to continue with that to attract that investment and therefore bring forward those jobs. What I would say is that the consideration of that is within the context, as the officer's presentation is outlined, that actually this building is completely within the parameters of what has been approved as well under the hybrid planning permission, and significantly so. And so arguably the question would be, it would be being reduced against something that's already an acceptable consideration in design terms, and therefore I would say all that would be achieved from that is diluting all of those economic benefits that would otherwise be achieved from here, that something is in design terms fully supported and acceptable, and arguably the potential to sterilise it from the market itself. If that's helpful.
Thank you for that. And another question is, as I understand, this is a speculative application, but clearly you must have got experience about the marketplace to justify putting this building here. If we were to approve planning permission today, what's the sort of time scale by which you'd expect to get an occupier to be using that site, or to even be interested and sign up to something?
It's a good question, and one that is probably best suited for my clients, given that they have the absolute expertise. So if you don't mind me deferring to them to answer that question, I will do so. Thank you. Yeah.
Hello, I'm Ben Houghton. I'm the Development Director at JNIC. It's a difficult question to answer because we don't know, but we are constantly in discussion with potential occupiers, as are our agents, of which we have 3. We have demand and we have discussions ongoing, and the answer is as soon as possible. I would predict it to be months, but obviously then you have the construction stage, which is probably a 7 to 9 month process, I would think.
Thank you. Are there any more questions from members? Okay, thank you very much for you and your team for answering our questions. We don't have any comments from the ward members, so if everyone's happy just to carry on, we will open this up for debate. Anybody like to make a start? Thank you, Councillor Haddingham.
I might as well go first then. I'm very impressed with this. I think it looks fantastic. I think the excellent BREEAM thing is all very impressive, and I'm very excited about it. And yeah, that's me. I'm very positive, and looking to approve of and continue to go with what our officers are recommending.
Thank you. Anyone else like to? Councillor Penny, followed by Councillor Overett.
I just say, like say, my only real concern is the point you raised about the waste management plan for the mixed B2 B8 use. But otherwise, I think it's at the top end of design and layout. Of course, we would like more landscaping, but I think it's a pretty good project.
Thank you. Councillor Overett.
Yeah, I think there are many benefits. The design is impressive, and the lower building height than the maximum really does enhance the longer distance views compared to how they could have looked, and the textured walls and what have you. Obviously, less concrete, and as the entrance way to this development would be very very preferable in many ways, but having heard these arguments, I feel on balance that it's okay.
Thank you. Councillor Warbice.
Well, yes, I think I make what's previously said. I can see the advantages of putting forward almost a turnkey building with adequate provision for making it future-proof infrastructure. I think that one of the big advantages is that, you know, projecting a sort of corporate image. We've got control of the design of the building, and that reinforces what's happening at the range, which is a positive thing. There's some queries being raised about the cycle paths and the routes around it, which I'm not quite certain I understood whether it's part of this proposal or not, or whether these criticisms could be addressed.
I think the cycle path is outside of the red line area, but I wasn't sure if Councillor Penny was referring to the cycle accesses within the site. And in fact, Councillor Overett asked a question about drop curbs for wheelchairs, and I presume that there will be some curb between the car park and the sort of foyer building. So that clearly needs to make sure that they're suitable. But were you referring to any cycle routing within the red line plan, Councillor Penny?
Well, it was a general dig at the very low standard of cycling infrastructure throughout the site, because it's far below the high criteria set by LTN 120 design. But it does have drop curbs right just on the border of the red line. The only issue relating to this plan specifically was what was envisaged would be the site access for cycling, which in reality would not happen, because I'm a cyclist, and whenever I cycle through that site, I'm not going to be using the cycle path unless I go over the 1120. So it was more a general comment related
is
to
there
the
a
site.
concern about how you access this site from the cycle network that was part of the outline, and is there anything we can do? Because, or is it that because the cycle path is on the shared sort of pavement cycleway, and you'll come to the entranceway of this plot, and there you join the road?
If coming from the south, being a cyclist, I would be cycling on the road and turning right into the junction and not using the cycle path.
But that's your choice. I'm more concerned about access from the cycle path, because often that is omitted.
Yeah.
You end up having to go join the road with it. So is there any access from the cycle path into the site?
No.
I think we're just getting up a plan, Chair.
So it's my understanding on this image that the blue indicates a possible route for cyclists, and the purple indicates a possible route for pedestrians. So obviously, slightly, I think I can, so this is a cycleway. So if you're coming from Mill Lane, this is arguably the quickest route into the site entrance. So you'd come along here, this is already in, and you'd just turn directly into the site, and you'd get directly to the cycle stores. If you're coming from the south, you either come down Mill Lane this way, but again, I don't know why you would come this way rather than this way, because you'd have to cross the HGV entrance and continue down Starfinder Way, and then you'd likely come into this southern vehicular access point. If you were coming from sort of Clamp Farm Barnes end or sort of Creting St Peter, you'd come along here, and obviously each one of these has, to my understanding, has a dropped curb, and then, yeah, blue indicates that you might cross the car park again here and into the cycle parking. Don't know if that helps or...
Well, I share Councillor Penny's comments about a lot of cycle paths, and often I'm on the road and I'll be turning right, but at least it has been thought of, which is a step in the right direction. Sorry, any further comments on the application? Councillor Overy.
Yeah, I do still have kind of questions as to whether the full, maybe creative potential for the full range of facilities for disabled employees or visitors to the site would be given full consideration. Hopefully so, and maybe this isn't the right place to ask that question or to pursue that, but I just wanted to really raise it as an important point. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Councillor Marriott.
I share Councillor Overett's concerns about the facilities for the disabled, and in fact I was going to raise that if you hadn't raised it. But I was just going to say that I do appreciate the use of the different cladding colours and the use of the fins to break down the apparent mass of the buildings. I think that a good job has been done there.
Thank you. Councillor Hedingham.
To propose that we go along with the officer's recommendation for approval.
Do we have a seconder for that proposal? Councillor Hardingham, thank you. I'd just like to say my comments. I do think this is a worthy application. There are some benefits, and I find it quite difficult to judge what the building is going to look like from the 3D make mock-up images. But someone actually said to me today that although they know that the range, the Plot 4000 thing, what I commonly refer to as the big shed, they said, yes, it is a big building, but actually they thought it looked all right. And I thought, wow, that was just completely off spec, that even though it's a big building, it doesn't actually look too bad. So maybe the design is okay. I find it quite difficult to judge. I can't quite visualise what these fins are going to look like. It all looks very nice in the pictures, but then, of course, that's what you've designed them to make them look pretty. So I find it quite difficult, and I just hope that, as people have said, this is the gateway building to our Gateway 14 site, and having a shiny new building there will certainly make it look more attractive than having a vacant plot that looks like a building site. And I think it is important that it has that gateway sort of feel to it. I know I talk about gateways and Gateway 14, it sounds like a bit silly, but it is going to be like the sort of forefront of the thing people are going to see when they first turn up. And it's got to look good, it's got to be sustainable, it's got to fit with all the other things the council wants to do. And I just hope it's gone far enough. I would like to see, I know you mentioned the potential ducting for HGV charging, which clearly is something for the future. And I don't know if that can be conditioned. I think there are concerns about the disabled access, and if that's something that can be picked up after a decision has been made to make sure that there are facilities and the drop curves are in suitable, within the plot are in suitable places. But there's still this outstanding issue of the waste collection point, if it's the combined use, which you said needed to be after, or we couldn't make a decision until we knew about that. So maybe you could just clarify that.
Yeah, I don't think we're saying you can't make a decision, Chair. It's one of the sort of things that we would often ask for a scheme for, and I think we've got two opportunities, and that we would do this in sort of the normal way we do, which is that I'd suggest that we add a condition to the permission. If the applicants resolve that while we're progressing towards the discharge of condition, towards the determination of the application, the actual issue of the decision on our side, they might resolve that and we might tweak it, and that's why we delegate authority to the Chief Planning Officer for conditions including or as necessary amended. So if we pop the condition on, we've got the absolute certainty. Worst case scenario, we'd get a discharge condition that specifically dealt with that. Preferably we'd get it in the meantime, so we've got that information by determination, but we can be fairly flexible on that. It's the sort of thing we'd expect. We've obviously seen a plan of what it looks like, and we can see how that would generally slot in with the alternate use as well. So I think that would be fair and reasonable to do, but also gives a little bit of flexibility in there as well, if that's right.
That's all of those points. That's to do with the HGV ducting for EV charging in the future, and making sure all of the drop curbs and disabled facilities are fully accessible for a wheelchair user.
So at the moment, Chair, I've got approver's recommendation, which is pages 40 to 41, with the additional condition to secure waste management information on the B2B8 use and the provision of HGV electric charging infrastructure. I hadn't added the disabled points. I might take Ian's advice on this one. A lot of that is covered by building regs, the sort of flat and level surfaces, the facilities to be provided, and the fact that the majority will be inside the building is something that really goes beyond our control.
I agree, I think, yes.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Warboys.
Yes, can I just pick up on that last point and make a suggestion? Having visited the Range building and together with Terence, sort of experienced the disability access. It consists of a ramp, but from Councillor Carter's point of view, this ramp was excessively long. And I presume the Rangers complied with building regulations, but perhaps this is a point that within the disability access, because of the scale of these buildings, is to avoid excessively long ramps. It's a bit like an excessively long staircase. If you fall or you slip or the brakes fail, you go an awful long way very quickly.
It was my understanding that these ramps had to have a certain angle, so presumably it depends on the height difference as to what the length of it is.
Well, yes. Well, this is what I'm saying, because these buildings are on quite a large scale with loading bays and things, that if there has to be a ramp, then it needs to be broken up into shorter length, not a single ramp, but two ramps with a
able to come back on
flat bit in between.
Yeah, just to say, obviously the levels on the range required retaining features and ramped entrance. It's my understanding that because of the levels of this site, ramped access isn't required.
Okay. So they're saying that the building's not higher than the land, but there will still be drop curbs.
We can always clarify with the applicant if you want certainty.
Okay, we'll ask the applicant. Thank you. Is this a level access building?
So this is probably my remit. So as Gemma and Avril said, the building needs to comply with Part M of the building regulations and the British standard for disabled access, which is probably, not being disparagingly, way in excess of the requirements that you're talking about this evening. There's a lot of considerations go into complying with all those side of things. But essentially, the range was an extreme case, but the access is compliant with all the British standards to do with it. It's not one big long ramp, it's got landings, it's got stop points on it. This building won't require anything like the range. It is essentially level access. And again, working through the building regulations, there will be requirements to do, we've got parking bays lined out, they will have bollards at the end, they will have signage allocating them as disabled access, they will have drop curbs, there will be a clear requirement for a defined, you need to create a suitable width of footpath to get from the car to the front door. Front doors then either need a system whereby you ring the bell and you're responded to, or there's an automatic push button so that the powered doors open and allow you in. You then get conditions, or you have to go through design requirements about the entrance, matting, daylighting, slip resistance on what all the finishes are on the floors. The lift will be fully compliant with Part M of the building regulations, so essentially big enough to take 8 people or 1 person in a wheelchair and the person assisting them. Again, there's quite restrictive design guidance about use of mirrors, or the mirror needs to be in such a place that actually if you're wheeled in, you can then see behind you to wheel yourself out. There's a whole raft of technical design guidance which we will need to work our way through. Not part of planning, with all due respect to Avril and Gemma. This is beyond planning. This is building regulations and all the technical stuff that we will need to work through.
Thank you. That does sound like it's reassuring. That I think that's reassured us.
There's not going to be launching ramps.
Thank you. Councillor Hardingham.
Since you've brought up the question of the waste location, I seem to remember from the car park layout in the B2, B8 scheme that there was a lorry bay at one end of the building and a lorry bay at the other, and the lorry access point is at the north end. Yes, the north end of the site, which means that you would have an HGV coming all the way through the car park to the parking bay at the southern end, and I just wonder whether that layout is fixed and whether it's an optimum from a safety point of view.
Do we need to get that plan up on the screen?
I may have misread the drawing, but
You sure it's bigger for me? So it would probably be, so the waste strategy for this, for the B8 option, obviously, is for the waste trucks to come in here, turn, collect waste from here, and then go back out. So I would envisage for the B2, B8, they would also come in here, because obviously there is a fence here. The blue line that you can see around here is weld mesh fence.
Yep, I stand corrected, yes. Okay. Yep. I'm misinterpreting the 2 drawings.
Thank you. Are there any more points for discussion that anyone wants to raise? If not, we do have a proposer and a seconder, and you're accepting the amended conditions. So we just probably need Gemma to read those out before we go for the vote. Thank you.
Of course, thank you, Chair. So we're looking at approval as the recommendation, which is on pages 40 to 41, and with additional conditions which are to secure waste management information on the B2, B8 use and provision of HGV electric charging infrastructure. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So I will now ask the Governance Officer to conduct the electronic vote.
Thank you, Chair. Members, that vote is now in progress. Councillor Warboys. Thank you. Thank you, members. Chair, that's 8 votes for. That's unanimous.
Thank you very much. Item number 8 is site inspections.
No receipt.
Thank you. So the next meeting of Mid Suffolk Planning Committee will be on Wednesday the 5th of June here in the King Edmund Chamber at 9:30, and I will now declare this meeting closed at 18:58. Thank you very much.